In this video, I'm going to show you how to make quiet areas, how to create texture using white paint and glazes, and how to create a palette that is harmonious so that the colour changes are soft and subtle. So the first thing I'm doing here is mixing up a dark colour by just using a combination of blue, red and yellow ochre. Now you can use any three colours, or any colours really, to mix up a dark colour. And now I want to create my light colours, and so I'm going to use white, any other colour and a little bit of that mixed colour. Now as long as I keep putting that little bit of mixed colour into whatever I mix up, my colours will be harmonious because they'll all have that in common with them. Now coming back to my palette and wanting to mix up another colour, if I take that cool colour that I've just mixed up and add a warm colour to it, that gives me a warmer version. Because the first colour has got that dark colour in it, then everything is still going to be harmonious. Whenever you mix up a new colour, it doesn't matter what you add to it, as long as you've got the previous colour in it, it will be harmonious. So you can see here this pinky one is very pink, so I'm just sort of desaturating it a bit with a bit of black and then adding a little bit of that ochre to it. And it's still quite pink, but it's harmonious because it has a little bit of the dark colour, it has the blue colour in it, and it has those other colours that I've added to it. Here I come adding another blue, and once again I've added previous colours that I've mixed up, and it really doesn't matter what I add to it, as long as it's got some of those previous colours in it, it will be harmonious and it will look good next to these colours. They're all from the same family. Now this colour has only got yellow and white in it, and you can see it's much brighter. It doesn't have the same softness and subtlety as those other colours do. So when I mix in a bit of the other mixed colours into that yellow and white, it's a warm yellowy colour, but it has that subtlety and it lives very happily within that family of colours. So whenever I want to make a new colour, I can add new colours to the white and just add a little bit of previous colours that I've used. They will all be harmonious, and that's a rule that applies whether you're mixing with whites or whether you're mixing with bold colours or dark colours. That rule holds that if you use colours that you've already mixed before, just tiny little bits into your new colour, they will be harmonious. And that's what I've done here. So now with the colour shaper, I'm going to just spread this paint around a little bit so that we can start building up some differences and texture and make this painting have a little bit more interest. Adding a little bit more saturated colour with the blue and just spreading that dark around so we've got some contrast with value as well in a few different places. And now I'm coming in with a pastel, and because the paint's wet I'm just moving it around. Okay, so these are the colours that I like to use for glazing, and glazing can be done with water, but I've recently started to use an airbrush medium. I squirt it onto the palette and just use a tiny little bit of the paint to create a very thin paint which has the consistency of water really, which can be put over the top of thick paint or thin paint. And it just is a transparent layer which is a contrast to thick opaque paint and adds another difference to your paint surface. You can get a lovely edge to it, as you can see with holding the paper up and letting the pigment sort of fall into an edge. And you can also get drips, which are another different type of paint effect. Both are lovely, and you can see in this detail here, looking in close, that the transparent layer adds a sort of richness to the surface of the painting. Now I'm using a cool glaze, so I'm using a bit of the Payne's grey, and just in exactly the same way, mixing it in with the airbrush medium and then layering it over. And it just sort of cools down areas and provides a different surface interest. And you can brush it on and then you can wipe it away, you can add it, make it a bit darker, but it is a transparent layer. It's a layer that you can see through to the thick paint and the marks underneath. It can give a painting or a surface a sort of an aged look, which adds a sort of richness to it. It's really lovely. I love using glazes. Once the glaze is dry, it's then good to come over the top again with thick paint, so that you've got this building up of thick and thin and thick and thin, and that really makes the surface really interesting and rich. So this is what I'm doing here, coming in with just white paint and then this more saturated blue as well, and just using things to disrupt that surface, like the sponge and the colour shaper, just to get different effects and marks happening. So as you can see here, I've got that warm colour and I'm putting a little bit of the blue into it so that it will stay within that harmonious range, but just be slightly different on a patch of glaze. So it's a thick bit of paint over the top of the glaze. Now I'm coming in with some line, just really fine loose line work with a charcoal pencil. So the layers are building up. You can see overlapping layers of thick paint, thin paint, and different effects and marks. So here I'm glazing again. You can see it's just a thin bit of paint that's warming up an area or cooling it, depending on which colour you make the glaze with. And more line using a different coloured pencil. This is a cool pencil. Keeping everything very delicate and soft, because this is this type of painting that we're making. And here you can see in this detail those thick and thin paint layers building up, glazes and over the top of thick paint, and then a little bit of thick paint over the top of glazes, and then disrupting the surface with the use of a pencil or the colour shaper, just moving the paint around a little bit. And this is how you create really interesting, delicate textural surfaces that aren't flat but don't have the really strong contrast that you see in a much more high contrast painting. It still has strong value contrast, but this painting is mostly about subtlety and sort of nuanced colours and just very soft sort of transitions between colours. So this can be done by using glazes and thick and thin paint.